Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. Sorry I'm a minute late. I hope that wasn't too upsetting to Dana or any of the rest of you. Welcome to the show. Glad you could join me. Hi to everybody in the live chat. As always, I will be answering questions that were submitted ahead of time by my wonderful Patreon patrons and channel members. So if you have a question for me in the live chat or something that you want me to talk about, or if you were especially going to be generous and throw in a super chat or something like that, please, if possible, hold on to that. Um, Thank you, David. David Colby says, I will not be forgiven. Thank you. I didn't ask for forgiveness. Actually, I did, didn't I? I said, forgive me for being late. I forget things as soon as I say them. That's something you should know about me. And that's a very good reason why I feel like I should never be held accountable for anything I say. Anyway, I'm going to do the patron and member questions. And there's a lot of them this time because my wonderful patrons and channel members were very, very prolific in sending in their questions this time. So I'm going to try to get through them as quickly as I can. And then I'll turn to the live chat for the rest of the show. So thanks, everybody, for submitting all your awesome questions. And here we go with the first of the patron and member questions. It's from Andrew Michael, who says, is there a specific amount of wealth that when that line is crossed becomes inherently immoral? Recently, my wage has dropped from 128,000 pounds to 22,000 pounds, i.e., minimum wage, and my old pay now seems obscenely high. But if I had been doing my old job in a U.S. hospital or research lab, it could have been 3 times that much. If you can measure annual earnings as a decent fraction of a million, is that too much? Maybe 0.5 million per year? How much is an ethical amount of money? See, I don't know if you can put an exact uh, number on it. It's sort of like the Supreme Court definition of pornography. Like, what amount of wealth is immoral? I can't tell you, but I know it when I see it. You know what I mean? It's sort of like that. It's not a matter of, oh, now you once you're $1 or £1 or whatever currency you're talking about, once you're one increment over this level, then you automatically are have an immoral amount of wealth. I don't think it works that way. It's more amorphous, and also it's about what you do with the money. Like, if you are someone who is very fortunate and you do very well in business or whatever, and you start making an obscene amount of money, what do you do with the money? Do you give it away to people who need it more than you do? Do you pay your fucking taxes and pay the taxes that you rightly owe, instead of coming up with all kinds of ways to hide money and, you know, try to reduce your tax liability to the lowest it can possibly get? Or do you pay your fair share in taxes? I mean, what do you do with the money? If billionaires used their money in an ethical way and paid their taxes and used it to fund programs, public, private, whatever, that actually helped people in need, and they used their money to make their communities and the world, more broadly speaking, a better place for people to live, then people probably wouldn't have nearly as big of a problem with billionaires as they do now. So it's not just the amount of money; it's the attitude that seems to come with it, and the kinds of behaviors that people who are ultra wealthy often seem to exhibit. But no, I can't think of like a specific dollar amount that where beyond that it's an unethical amount of money. David Colby, who will not forgive me, I enjoyed your 3 endings of TNG. I have to say, Nemesis is a much better premise than All Good Things because it's actually about stuff that matters. Oh no, will we technobabble a solution to this made up field? Who gives a shit? No one. Nemesis, meanwhile, is about slavery and empire and the aftermath of war and clones. One of my favorite books, Brothers in Arms by Lois McMaster Bujold, has almost the same plot, but the thing is, in Brothers in Arms, the clone is given humanity and empathy. The recurring motif is the main character thinking of what his mother, who is basically a Starfleet officer, would say. Miles, what have you done with your baby brother? All of this is fantastic. Doubly so when you consider Picard losing his entire family in a fire. Found family, unexpected family, all set in this epic space opera backdrop. It's a crackler! And then they completely fucking wasted it. They wasted it worse than a Strange New Worlds episode wastes Ethan fucking Peck. Holy shit. Ha! Still managed to shit on Strange New Worlds. Eat it. It's quite a talent you have there, my friend. I admire it. I disagree with it. I find it misdirected, but I admire it. Yeah, I mean, that is one of the that is one of the frustrating things about Nemesis is, like I said in the video, on paper, it has all of the ingredients for what should have been a fantastic movie, and specifically a fantastic farewell story to these characters, and they just didn't take advantage of any of it. And what your question just made me think of is, you're right. I mean, in terms of the plot, All Good Things is really nothing to write home about, because it is like the threat is, vague technobabble bad thing. Like it's sort of uh an example of a trope that TNG and the TNG era Star Trek shows leaned on a little too frequently. Like, oh, there's a big bad space thing and we need to do a technobabble thing to defeat the threat of the big bad space thing. And yet, All Good Things succeeds where Nemesis, with the much more compelling sounding premise and plot, fails because All Good Things winds up being about the characters, and specifically about Captain Picard and his feelings toward his crew, and how those feelings and that sort of his appreciation of his people coming home to him uh, grounds that last episode, and indeed grounds the entire series up to that point, in that emotion and that feeling of belonging and that desire to actually be close to these people instead of being aloof around them. And so that's what makes it work. And Nemesis doesn't have any of that. Nemesis has a more compelling premise with the material there for dealing with much weightier themes, and it does nothing with them. So if you could somehow take the characterization and the emotional content of All Good Things and the plot and thematic elements of Nemesis and smush them together, you'd probably have a pretty good Deep Space Nine episode. Anyway, Brian McKinley says, "Hi, Steve. I've been enjoying your reviews with Jason, and my question is partly inspired by Under the Cloak of War. What do you think is the difference between a good person who has done bad things and a bad person who has done good things? If the answers are different, where's the line in the abstract versus your personal line?" Oh, I mean, for me, it really depends on the nature of the bad things that have been done and how many bad things have been done or how long of a time they've been done through. I mean, I feel like if you are a person who does bad things, then you're a bad person. I do have kind of a we are what we do philosophy. If you put pain and misery into the world on a semi-regular basis, in ways that you could, especially in ways that you are choosing to do, or ways that you could choose to not do, right? Like, it's not as though I was in an impossible situation, I had to make a choice, somebody was going to suffer no matter what I did. Like, no, I'm not talking about that kind of stuff. I'm talking about just in your everyday life, are you living in such a way that you are actively adding to the misery, or are you living in such a way that you are trying not to add to the misery and maybe even trying to lessen it, right? That's really the difference for me. It's all about what you do. If I dare to quote a line of dialogue from a very overrated Batman movie, it's not who I am underneath, it's what I do that defines me. So that's really the big thing for me. And I like, just like with Andrew's question about, how much money is an unethical amount of money, I don't know where the line is. Like, I don't know if there is a specific line, or if it's more like a gradient, and that you're on the wrong side when you're far enough on the wrong side to be able to tell, like, oh shit, I've gone too far. But there's not a moment where you can say, oh, if I take one more step, then I will cross the line and I will be a bad person instead of a good person. I don't think it really works that way. But to me, it's all about deeds. It's about actions. I think our actions define whether or not we are good people or bad people. So if you are a good person who has done bad things, then maybe you would be a person who, for the most part, has not done bad things and has tried not to do bad things. But every once in a while, you slipped up, or you found yourself in an impossible position, or you just whatever, and you've done some bad things, and the opposite of that would be a person who does mostly bad things or lots of bad things and doesn't really care. And then every once in a while, you do a good thing for whatever reason. It's all about the things that you do and the impact that you have on the world for me. But I'm not sure where the line is or even if there is one. Danny K says, "Hey, Steve, did you ever have a favorite wrestling video game? For me, it never got any better than WCW versus NWO Revenge for the Nintendo 64. Thanks. Hope all is well." I know that WCW NWO Revenge for N64 is still the gold standard for many longtime gamers who were into wrestling games. I actually never played it, so I can't say whether I enjoyed it or not. The two times in my life when I was really into video games, the consoles that I had were an NES when I was like a preteen and a teenager. And then many years later, when I was a young adult, I got a PlayStation 2. And those are really the only two intervals in my life where I've ever been like interested enough in video games and like played them enough to actually have like a gaming console with a library of games. Um, so my favorite and the wrestling games for the NES were not that great, were not that memorable. I mean, I have a sort of nostalgic memory of Tecmo World Wrestling, but it's not a good game. I mean, I remember it fondly because I played it a lot when I was a kid, and it's tied in with my childhood and being a wrestling fan back then. And but as a game, I've actually played it relatively recently on a Raspberry Pi. I've played like an emulated version of it. It's not a good game at all, but whatever. I have fond memories of it. But probably one of the WWE games from the early 2000s that were on PlayStation 2, like Raw versus SmackDown, or one of the Raw versus SmackDown games. I can't remember specifically which one of those I would pick, but one of those. Yeah. I remember, I think it was the one, it was Here Comes the Pain, the one that had Brock on the cover. I think I played that one a lot. I played through career mode on that one a lot, and I had some creative characters on it. So probably one of those, just by virtue, and I can't really offer like an informed opinion on the quality of the game relative to other games or the mechanics of it or whatever. I just know it was fun to play when I had it, and while I was in that phase of being into video games, uh, and that crossed over with my wrestling fandom. I played those games a lot until I got bored and didn't play them anymore. So probably one of the early 2000s WWE games. Isaiah Taylor. "So, Steve, I just got done watching Terminator 2 Judgment Day again for the first time in several years. And man, I came to one simple conclusion. Man, Los Angeles was scary as shit back in the 80s and 90s. Richard Ramirez to the murder of 18 LAPD cops by a sunglasses wearing time traveling cyborg in 1984. The 1988 Christmas Eve siege at Nakatomi Plaza. Then those several days in 1991 when the entire city of Los Angeles was traumatized by a woman named Sarah Connor, her son, and the same guy from the 1984 massacre going on a rampage throughout the city. Imagine you are a newscaster covering reports of shots fired at the house of famed computer scientist Miles Dyson, then getting reports of a terrorist attack at the Cyberdyne building. Los Angeles under siege tonight on KTLA, not to mention the Rodney King and OJ situations later. Would you lock your doors, Steve? Buy a gun? Not a serious question, but just humor. Sorry about the hangout from Sunday. Much love." Well, it was good. It was good to see you, even if you could only stay for a few minutes. I appreciated seeing you on Sunday, and I know the rest of us did too. I mean, I lock my doors now, and I live in a relatively, it's like a suburban area where there's virtually no crime, certainly no serious crime to speak of. And I mean, I could probably get away with not locking my doors, but I always lock my doors. So I would certainly lock my doors if I were living in the urban hellscape of Los Angeles in the 1980s, according to the Terminator movies and the Die Hard movies, and real life. Yes, but no, I wouldn't buy a gun. I don't think I can't imagine myself ever owning a gun at this point. Like my philosophical beliefs on guns are far too strong. I could never justify it. I believe very strongly that introducing a gun into any situation makes it inherently more dangerous, not less dangerous. So I would never be a gun owner. But lock the doors. Yeah, I lock the doors now as a Hagerstown citizen. If I were a 1980s LA resident with Terminators running around, you're damn right I'd be locking my doors. Uh, the Thinking Cat. There's a YouTube link mainly because, happily for me, the showrunner on Strange New Worlds has said that it and Discovery are an alternative dimension. As I mild to Strange New Worlds, though it's not the Cage Pike, it's an okay show, as season arcs are fine when they're not wheel spinning like Discovery has done multiple times from season 2 to the last season, stretching a plot to the breaking point. But I finally got the HD all episodes on digital of Prodigy, and really, I wish the live action writers could learn the benefits to a small cast and no fluff plotting, as well as the beauty of a finite resource, as the protostar drive is the coolest thing in Trek since quantum torpedoes. And the benefit is you have to build to use it, something spore drive and warp seems to have overused. My main question is, now they're admitting it's an alternative timeline. Can you envision maybe season 3 of Strange New Worlds crossing over to a Prime universe or even the J.J. Abrams movie universe? Well, first of all, I do think, and I don't mean to, spoil your fun here. I think you may be misinterpreting what Akiva Goldsman said. He does. I don't think his point was that Strange New Worlds is an alternate timeline relative to classic Star Trek. I think the intention is still that Strange New Worlds is in the same timeline as classic Star Trek. That it is literally like Pike's Enterprise in Strange New Worlds is literally the same ship in the same universe as Pike's Enterprise that we see in the Cage and as Kirk's Enterprise that we see, in the main body of TOS. I don't think that is the intention. What Akiva Goldsman said was they are continuing to revise the fictional history of Star Trek so that it is more compatible with real life. Because in the 60s, they said, oh, there was this big global conflict called the Eugenics Wars, and that happened in the 90s. And now that we are, 30 years past the 90s, or 20 some years past the 90s, if you go by the late 90s, now that the 90s are decidedly in the past and there were no eugenics wars, that bit of Star Trek's fictional history no longer matches up with real history. And again, I've talked about this before. I don't think it's necessary. I think it's completely fine for Star Trek's fictional history to not match up with our real history perfectly because it's fiction and I don't really care. But because they want Star Trek, I guess, to continue to be aspirational, and they feel like it's easier to do that if they keep the two histories, the fictional history and the real history, as close to one another as they can. They used the time travel episode this season in Stranger Worlds to make some revisions and to push the eugenics wars further into the future so that they have not happened yet, for us, basically. Like if the eugenics wars were to happen now, as they are said to happen in Strange New Worlds, they would happen further into the future. They wouldn't have happened in the 90s. But that's not saying that now Strange New Worlds is in an alternate timeline as TOS. Strange New Worlds and Discovery and all of the Paramount Plus shows are still meant to be in the prime timeline. It's just that the prime timeline is different now than it was before because it's been, sort of reconfigured slightly using time travel, but it's still supposed to be the same ship in the same universe. But could I see it crossing over? So I don't see it crossing over into the Prime universe because I think it literally is the Prime universe. But could they do a crossover with the J.J. Abrams? I mean, there's no reason why they couldn't. I don't know if they're going to. I don't know if they see any commercial value in that. I mean, they're having a hard time even before the strikes and everything shut the whole industry down. They were having a very hard time getting the fourth Kelvin timeline movie for Star Trek out of development. I mean, there have been, I think, 2 or 3 false starts for the fourth Kelvin timeline movie. And even before the strikes, it seemed like once again it had ground to a halt and it wasn't going anywhere. So unfortunately, it doesn't seem like it's going to happen anytime soon, even if the strikes are resolved relatively quickly. I don't think there's going to be any, movement on that Kelvin timeline uh, version of Star Trek. And if they did, I don't see why they would want to do, like a streaming crossover as opposed to another movie. So I mean, there's no reason, logistically why they couldn't. They're, Christ, they did a crossover with a cartoon show on Strange New Worlds a couple weeks ago. They did a musical episode this week. There's no reason why they couldn't. It's all made up. They just make up a reason why the universes would cross over, and as long as everybody's on board, there you are, right? But I don't know if they're going to. I don't know if they would find it, worth doing from a commercial standpoint. Dana, who is considering violence, so God help us all. At my new school, they typically teach Othello in 10th rather than Caesar. I originally asked to teach that nearly 2 decades ago, but was told I had to use Caesar, which I found dry as stale toast. But eventually, I finally found a unique, compelling angle for Caesar. My department head says if I can justify it, he's cool with me teaching Caesar and would be willing to purchase copies. The thing is, I think I'm going to go with Othello, in part because I'd rather spend the money on Vanessa Nakate's memoir, A Bigger Picture, but also it's important to me as a professional to continue to challenge myself. Othello has some incredibly important themes, which don't fit because this is already long, so I'll screenshot them and you can show them / discuss them if you want. The ask I have for you is, you seem pretty chill. Can you think of a situation in which you would actually choose violence, not just property, but choose to inflict physical harm on another person? What would it be? Well, first of all, I'm not going to discuss your discussion questions, Dana, because you did send me the screenshot, but there's a ton of stuff there, and I feel like it would completely derail this whole video if I did that in the middle of the patron and member questions. And like I said, I have a total of 30 of these to get through, so I'm just, with all due respect, I'm not going to do that. But as far as uh, would I choose to inflict physical harm? Would I choose violence, and what would provoke me to do that? I mean, it would have to be either a case of like self-defense or defending someone I cared about. I mean, I can't imagine myself ever like going up and starting a fight with someone, even if they really pissed me off or I felt like they deserved to get their ass kicked. I just don't think I'm the person to go up and administer an ass kicking unprovoked, unprovoked physically, I mean. But if it was a self-defense situation, or if I felt like immediately or imminently physically threatened, or that, again, someone who was nearby who I cared about was imminently physically threatened, I can see myself, stepping in and getting physical to try and, protect them or protect myself. But anything short of that, no, uh, I can't really see myself choosing violence unless it was like a self-defense kind of thing or a last resort sort of thing. No. I will not be lunging to bite out anyone's throat anytime soon, I don't think. Keith Parker, zany neighborhood NASA guy. Hey, Steve, I've written fiction off and on my whole life and even had some success traditionally publishing short stories and a novel. So as you might guess, I love the development of characters. Lately, I've been trying to puzzle out what Strange New Worlds is doing with Spock. Virtually every episode sees him having an emotional reaction of some sort, and for a while this irked me. I always found stoic Spock from TOS more entertaining. But I started thinking, which is never good, perhaps the writers are intentionally doing this. Perhaps they want to see how he goes from a young, undisciplined Vulcan to the one we see in TOS, who is much more reserved once we get past the first few episodes. Do you think that the Star Trek writing team is actually doing this? Or do they simply want to cater to the fans who love it when Spock gets emotional? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Forgive typos. I'm writing this on my phone. Well, for typing it on your phone, there aren't that many typos, my friend. So congratulations. I don't know. I think it's probably a combination of wanting to do a younger Spock and then showing how he will eventually sort of reach the point in his development that we see in TOS, and also just taking that as an opportunity to do something different. And honestly, if I had to guess, and I might be projecting a little bit of what I would do in this situation, so, take this with a grain of salt, but I think it's probably more of the second thing. I think the writers of Strange New Worlds, when they they decided, okay, Spock is going to be in this show and he's going to be a major part of this show. And this show is set in the prime timeline, but a few years before Star Trek, the original series, is supposed to take place. And we see in the original pilot episode, and then also in the first episode, and a little bit in the first few episodes of the first season of the original series, Spock is a little more emotional. As I said in my Spock video that I put up a couple weeks ago, Leonard Nimoy in those early episodes, you can see him fine tuning the performance. You can see him sort of honing his take on the character and finding Spock. And so Spock is a little more emotionally demonstrative in the early episodes. And because of that, the writers of Strange New Worlds can say, aha, we're dealing with an earlier version of Spock, even than the first few episodes of TOS, because Strange New Worlds is between The Cage and the first season of classic Trek. So that's an opportunity for us to make our Spock different without violating canon and causing all the fanboys to piss their pants in rage over, you did it different than it's supposed to be. There's a window there that they can make their Spock different without contradicting something from another show. And I think that's mostly what they're doing. Now, they also have the opportunity to sort of take their Spock and eventually kind of feather him into the more familiar Spock from TOS. And I suppose if the show runs long enough, they will do something like that. But honestly, like I try to put myself in the headspace of the writers, and that by itself is not interesting to me. Like, I feel like if the show runs long enough, and if you have decided that you don't want your show to contradict the old show too egregiously, that is something that you will have to do, and that will become part of the challenge of writing the show, to sort of move Spock in that direction in a way that feels natural to your show, but that also has him winding up in a place where we would have found him at the beginning of TOS. But that by itself is not super interesting to me as like a primary mission. That's like a secondary goal. To me, the most interesting thing would be to say, aha, we have this opening here. As far as the setting of the series, we have the opportunity and the freedom to make our Spock within certain parameters, obviously, but there's some play there. That's way more interesting to me than let's take a young Spock and make him and match him up to the other. I don't care. I mean, I would do that if that was part of the premise of the show and I was a writer on the show. Of course, I'd want to do the best job of doing that as possible, but I'm much more interested in the opportunity of saying, oh, here's a younger Spock. He hasn't quite set, into the Spock that we know from the classic series. We can do something different with him here. That's so I suspect that's more of what they're doing than, doing it with the primary purpose of showing him develop into the more disciplined Spock. But as I said at the beginning, I have no idea. But what I said is for me, if I were working on that show, that would be a much more interesting and creatively fulfilling possibility. John Yodelay, he who burns. I was up to 6 a.m. watching the Canadian women's soccer team play Australia at the World Cup Monday morning. In 2004, Chris Chelios called out Gary Bettman during the NHL labor dispute with more of an NHL style than Ron Perlman. But then I doubt Ron Perlman will apologize like Chris did after the NHL resumed play. In the end, it will be up to the contract. Do you remember 3-picture deals? Okay, I mean, are you suggesting that they will punish Ron Perlman because he alluded to the fact that there's a lot of ways that someone can lose their house in the heat of a strike right after one of the most powerful men in Hollywood had allegedly said that their strategy for winning the strike, the producer, or not the producers, but the studios, their strategy for winning the strike would be to hold out until writers and actors start losing their houses. And in that context, Ron Perlman, rightly pissed off, said there's a lot of ways to lose your house, motherfucker, which, by the way, I don't think he has anything to apologize for. I don't think there's a damn thing wrong with anything he said there. And I don't think his union that he is on strike for at the moment would allow a studio to to manipulate his contract specifically to retaliate against him saying that. So, I mean, I don't know if Ron Perlman, I don't know if he had an existing contract with the studio before the strike or not. I don't know if he had a 3-picture deal or what. Um, that's all that those sorts of contracts are negotiated between actors and studios and production companies and studios and production companies and actors. But they would still have to be within the minimums and the limitations set by whatever the next collective bargaining agreement is between the studios and the unions. So, but if no, I mean, I hope Ron Perlman doesn't apologize. Fucking Bob Iger should apologize. Fuck Ron Perlman apologize, and Bob Iger should apologize, and all of those motherfuckers should have. You know what? Here's what they should do when they finally settle the strike and the AMPTP, and SAG-AFTRA and the WGA all come to an agreement on their new collective bargaining agreements with each other. How about the AMPTP fucking apologizes for causing the strike? How about that? How about they fucking apologize instead of the actors and the writers? What the fuck? Ron Perlman has nothing to apologize for. Not a goddamn thing. Agent Meister, who wholeheartedly endorses this product, service, or event. Hey, Krusty. Peldor Joy, Steve, and happy anniversary. Anniversary? What anniversary, you may well ask? Mm-hmm. Well, it was about this time 5 years ago that the YouTube algorithm suggested that I might like to watch your Trek Actually video on why Barclay is a great character. I didn't know about your channel then, but the rest, as they say, is history. At the risk of sounding like I'm gushing, I have thoroughly enjoyed your content ever since. What I love about it the most is that it is a forum where fans of Star Trek get together and discuss storylines, episode characters, and various aspects of this wonderful franchise that first aired on TV some 30, 40, 50, or 60 years ago. And from what I can make out, it is done with little or no acrimony. Your work has made me laugh, it's made me cry, and made me think. But above all, it's kept me entertained. So thank you for all the hard work. And here's to the next 5 years and more. I'll finish by paraphrasing Modest Mouse and hope that you and yours all float on all right. What a lovely comment. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for watching for these 5 years. Thank you for being a supporter. I really appreciate that. And thank you for always asking questions for these and always asking such interesting questions. And I'm glad that you enjoy my stuff. I'm glad that you're still here. I'm glad that that video made you think I was worth paying attention to and eventually worth contributing to and supporting in a monetary way. That's I thank you. I thank you very much, my friend. And paraphrasing Modest Mouse, which is one of my favorite bands, and Float On was the song that got me into Modest Mouse. And then I went back after I heard, because Float On was like their big crossover radio hit. And I was like, oh man, I love this band. And I got that album, and that album was fantastic. And then I went back and I got their older stuff. And I listened to like The Moon in Antarctica. And This Is a Long Drive for Someone with Nothing to Think About. And The Lonesome Crowded West, which is now one of my favorite albums by anybody ever. That is just an absolute masterpiece. So, thank you for the Modest Mouse reference. It was, I don't know, I'm maybe I've mentioned that I'm a Modest Mouse fan in the past, or maybe that was purely a coincidence, but I'm a huge Modest Mouse fan. And I appreciate the allusion to the Modest Mouse song that made me a fan. So cool. Here's to 5 more years. Dataport Doll. Good evening, Steve. Let me open with an anecdote. This week, as I was passing Chick-fil-A, I wasn't going in, of course, especially not when the grocery store next door now sells knockoff Chick-fil-A products, which taste better, by the way. There was a homeless veteran on the sidewalk near the building with a peddling sign, the kind Americans sadly become desensitized to. As I was in earshot, a guy coming out of the CFA shouts at this man, "The vocational office is open, you lazy fuck." He must be on the GOP county board, which got me thinking. Chick-fil-A is still a corpo wet wipe, but as they did marginally roll back their anti-queer endeavors, I see them as deserving of a low-yield photon torpedo as opposed to, say, Hobby Lobby, who committed literal crimes against humanity, and yet they still hold the loyalty of the worst kind of people. Which is more important, a company's official policy or the fan base it quietly tolerates in deciding a company's value to society, even if the difference is marginal? I mean, I think it's kind of hard to separate the two, you know? Like, with Chick fil A, even though they have toned down the bigotry in more recent years, the reason why that loyalty with shitty right wingers exists is because of that bigotry, is because Chick-fil-A was the anti-gay chicken, right? Like that, and the avowedly Christian, and not just Christian, but a specific form of like right-wing fundamentalist conservative Christianity that, endeared Chick-fil-A to that demographic forever. So with Chick-fil-A, it's hard, even though they've toned down the policy was responsible for that. So it's hard to separate it. I guess going back to what I said earlier about, like, actions versus what's in your heart, I guess what really matters is the impact that you have on society. And if you, either through intentional policy or just by some quirk of fate, have attracted a fan base, a customer base, whatever you call it, of the worst people in the country, and you're okay with that because it puts money in your pocket and keeps the stock price up, then I kind of think you're a piece of shit. Like, if you knowingly cater to shitty people who are actively trying to harm the country and harm vulnerable people, then I don't see how you're a good company. You are, even if you are not causing damage to society, you are still supporting people who are causing damage to society, and you are giving aid and comfort, to coin a phrase, to the people who are damaging society. So I think you're still pretty guilty of that. You are complicit in, what those people are doing if you don't say, hey, you know what, go buy your fucking chicken somewhere else. you know which, of course, obviously, I mean, not to even specifically attack Chick-fil-A. Like, no fucking corporation in this country would do that. That would be tantamount to, like, oh my God, you might as well ask them to kill their own children. In fact, the top executives probably would kill their own children before they would make a public statement like that and alienate potential customers. Like, that's just, oh God, no, we could never do that. That's unthinkable, right? So it's not just Chick-fil-A that would do that or has done that. It's potentially, like, I mean, God, I love Burger King. If it turned out that Nazis decided Burger King was their favorite restaurant, I would like to think that someone at Burger King would say, hey, we need to release a statement. We need to make it clear that, like, Nazis aren't welcome here and we'd rather they go back to Chick-fil-A. But I don't know for sure that that would happen. It probably wouldn't. They'd probably look at the numbers and say, actually, the Nazis are really moving some Whoppers. And they'd say, well, let's just not say anything. Let's just keep our mouth shut about it. Yeah, hey, you know what? Maybe they have good taste in burgers, those Nazis. It will probably be something like that. Unfortunately, because of how fucked up our system is. But yeah, something like that. There's an answer to your question in there somewhere, I think. All right, motherfucker, motherfucker, motherfucker. There, I cursed. Happy now? And hi, this is Some Random Geek. I am very happy now. Thank you. Give money to Joanna, Phoenix, and Joey. They always need money. I will post links in the chat. Now, anyway, Steve, what do you do with frustration? And assuming you can do anything about the thing that is making you frustrated. Like, I had the urge to punch a wall out of my frustration with missing my bus by 1 minute, and the next one being an hour away. And of course, punching a wall would be terrible. I either put a hole in my apartment wall or I break my hand on a concrete wall. I often get this frustration dying in Fortnite, mostly because I hate myself for sucking at the game when I don't want to suck at the game. I spend $2,000 on the game. And even times there is nothing I could have done in the game to not die because it happens, like getting headshot sniped. I still get frustrated and scream. even when playing a casual game mode where I am always respawning. And I scream in frustration in other video games. I've destroyed 3 of my hats because of this. Any suggestions? Um, get cheaper things that you can destroy in frustration instead. um, I can relate. Like during my first video game phase, when I was like a kid into the first few years of my adolescence, I would get very frustrated at video games if I got stuck or if I kept dying or I couldn't get to where I wanted to go or I couldn't beat a level or couldn't beat a game I wanted to beat. Um, I would all of my controllers rattled when you shook them. They all had like the because I would throw them. I would throw them in frustration and anger. I would yell and scream and holler and carry on. And it was, yeah, I mean, sometimes that sort of frustration just has to come out and you have to scream or you have to hit something or you have to take it out on something, you know? Um, Nowadays, as Dana pointed out in her question, I'm pretty mellow. Like I don't often get frustrated in that way, in a way that to the degree that like I have to express it in some physical way, like I have to scream or I have to hit something or I have to do something about it. I'm not saying I never feel that way. On rare occasions I do, but for the most part I don't. Um, and it's the calmness that comes with age, I guess, and the realization that, you know what, most of this shit doesn't matter, so it's not worth getting that upset about. Um, I might also suggest, if playing video games makes you that upset, maybe don't do it as often, you know? Or maybe play on an easier level. Like, I've never played Fortnite. I have no idea how it works, but the idea, and this is just me. This is just me, and I know everybody's different, and I know a lot of gamers view things differently than I do, obviously. The idea of playing a video game on the most difficult level is just completely alien to me. Like, I don't understand why you would do that. Like, there's no actual skill involved. It's video game skill. Like, it's not applicable to anything else. You're playing a video game. So you're not like getting better at something that's going to aid you in some other part of your life. Unless, I guess, you're like, a drone pilot or a professional video gamer or something like that. Um, like, I play video games on the rare occasions that I play them now. I play video games because I want to feel good about myself. I want to win. I want to, do something easy but also fun and fulfilling that will ultimately make me feel good about myself for having accomplished something, even if it's an imaginary something that has no meaning outside of the game. I still accomplish something and it's fun. And if I'm not having fun and I'm not feeling like I'm accomplishing anything, or I'm not making myself feel better, or, making myself feel good about myself, then why am I doing it? I don't want game. I like the idea of, I want the video game to challenge me. What? No. I want art to challenge me. Now, if the video game is challenging you on a moral way, in an ethical way, if the story of the video game is like challenging you by forcing you to grapple with questions the same way any other form of art would, then yeah, that's great. But a challenge in the sense of it's hard to beat the game, like an actual physical challenge of it's difficult, like, fuck that. What's the fucking point of that? That's the dumbest shit I've ever heard in my fucking life. Of course, I would make the should be as easy as it possibly can. Like, what the fuck? I don't want it to be so hard that I'm like throwing the controller across the room and I'm getting angry at myself and at the game because it's so hard to beat. That doesn't make any sense to me. If it's too hard for me to beat, even on like an easy level, then I'm just not going to play the fucking thing. Life's too short, you know? But again, that's just me. Like, that's just me. But I will say, as a kid, I understood, screaming in frustration and throwing the controller. But as an adult, I think, okay, if the game's going to make me do that, I'm just not going to play it. I'll do something else, you know? And maybe that's why I don't play video games very often anymore, because I was never super good at them to begin with. And I finally realized, what the fuck am I doing this for? I'm not good at it. It doesn't make me feel good about myself. It's not fun. I can do something else, you know? Oasis, with this week's episode of Strange New Worlds in mind, no spoilers obviously, have you ever watched any musicals? Have you ever watched any shows presented as a musical? For my money, my favorite show presented as a musical was an episode of Scrubs. It was titled appropriately, My Musical. Basic synopsis: a woman faints in the park and suddenly everyone and herself are now singing. Oh god, yes, I've seen lots of musicals. I mean, there are even a few that I have liked. Like, I love Hamilton. I love Hamilton. Hamilton makes me cry. Hamilton is a masterpiece. And I've seen lots of other musicals too. I've seen most of like the major, like classic movie musicals. Um, haven't super enjoyed most of them. I do like The Music Man. My now ex-wife was, and I presumably still is, a big fan of The Music Man. She used to watch it all the time as a kid. So she and I would watch The Music Man occasionally when we were together. And I eventually gained a pretty good appreciation for that, and specifically for Robert Preston. So it's not, but yeah, I've seen lots of musicals. Um, as far as musical episodes of TV shows, I never watched Scrubs, so I didn't see the musical episode of Scrubs. Obviously, the one that everybody talks about is the musical episode of Buffy, and I do think the musical episode of Buffy is very good. I think the musical episode of Buffy is excellent. Um, and I mean, The Simpsons has done some musical episodes. Bob's Burgers has done musical episodes. There's South Park. When I was still watching South Park before I gave up on it. South Park did musical episodes, and of course, the South Park movie was a musical. So I mean, there are lots of sort of diversions, you know, into the musical genre the TV shows have done that I've watched and enjoyed. But as for what my favorite, I'm not sure if I could even pick a favorite. My favorite musical overall of anything is probably Hamilton, because it's the only one I can think of that like actually moved me the way like a really good non-musical would have. It's not something where I was watching it going like, this is okay, but this would be better if they just weren't fucking singing, if they actually tried to tell a story. And Hamilton, I didn't feel that way. Hamilton, I was like, oh no, this is good. But yeah, just because I don't enjoy musicals as a rule doesn't mean I've never watched them or like I refuse to watch them or anything. I've seen quite a few of them. Most of them I have not enjoyed all that much, but I've seen quite a few of them. Kier is feeling sad. No question, just a simple request. Can everyone send whatever positive energy they have to my dad? He had a heart attack recently and needs help, but won't ask for it because he's that age and that stubborn. Well, for whatever it's worth, Kier, I am thinking good thoughts about your dad and hoping that he gets the help that he needs and then he's okay. As people who watch my stuff regularly know, my best friend Jason Harding, who I do the Star Trek reviews with on Saturdays, and who is the creator and the creative genius really behind the podcasts that I do with him and that Dana also does with us on the Ensign's Log. He has had heart trouble recently. He's been dealing with heart failure, and has had to sort of change his life in a lot of pretty significant ways to deal with that and to continue to have a good quality of life. So I know that through him and through his experience that I've been able to have a little bit of a taste of, um, that heart issues can be incredibly difficult and incredibly scary. So I really hope that your dad is okay and if and is able to get to a point where that stubbornness subsides and he realizes there are more important things, and hopefully he wants to continue to stick around for a while, and he gets the help that he needs to deal with his issues. So yes, I'm having very positive thoughts. I don't really believe in the in the practicality of that, but it can hurt. So best wishes to you and your dad for sure, and hopefully everybody else watching follows suit with that. Rick Jana, am I the only one who could do without the slick new action sequences in Strange New Worlds? Call me old fashioned, but I prefer my Trek fights slow, exaggerated, and supported by melodramatic music. To me, it's analogous to the situation in pro wrestling. I don't love the current product with all the high spots and cheap pops. Slow it down, I say. Tell a story. Well, I definitely agree with you on pro wrestling. We're 100% on the same page there. I don't, if I never see another fucking wrestler jump off a ladder or break a table or get slammed into fucking thumbtacks or any of the other ridiculous asinine spots that have become so commonplace in professional wrestling today, I mean, it'll be too soon. I would much rather see a sensible, and it doesn't even matter. It could be a fast paced match. It could be a slow paced match. Pacing so much isn't the problem. It's like you said at the end of your question, tell a story, make me care about what happens. Tell me a story. And a good action scene or a good fight scene in a movie should be the same way. Again, regardless of the pace, regardless of the style, um, a fight scene in a movie or a TV show should have its own internal plot, and we should be able to understand why the person who wins the fight wins the fight. It shouldn't just be you punch me, I punch you, punch, punch, kick, kick, brawl, 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 then the good guy wins, which again is a problem with a lot of modern wrestling. It's they take turns doing increasingly dangerous or impressive or spectacular moves to each other. And then after they've wrestled for the predetermined amount of time, like, okay, it's been 20 minutes, go home. And then they do whatever move they have selected to be the end. And that's the end. And it doesn't make any sense. It's like, well, wait a minute. He got dropped on his head 25 times 5 minutes ago, and that wasn't the end of the match, but he just got clotheslined, and now that's the end of the match. Like, it doesn't make any sense. It feels random because there wasn't a story that built up to the finish that made it make sense in a particular context. And with a fight scene in a movie or a TV show, it needs to be the same way. If Captain Kirk defeats Khan in the fight, we need to be able to understand why he defeats him, you know? And yeah, so I mean, the fight scene in the first episode of season 2 of Strange New Worlds, like the multiple extended fight scenes where it was Nurse Chapel and Dr. Mbenga after they take the super soldier serum and then they're like fighting their way through multiple hallways filled with Klingons, that got old really quick for me. But other than that, I can't really think of an action sequence or a fight sequence in Strange New Worlds this season that I felt that way about. For the most part, I think the action scenes and the fight scenes in Strange New Worlds are okay. But I see what you mean, and in general, I totally agree with you. Stephen G. Clenard, hey Steve, I was checking out the Major League Baseball standings and saw something quite unexpected. Your home state heroes, Baltimore Orioles, perennial punching bags of the AL East, are proudly perched not just atop the division, but sport the best record of the entire AL. That is true. What gives? Are these longtime lovable losers for real? How far can they go? Are we witnessing the dawn of a new era of orange bird dominance with the hopes and dreams of the Blue Jays, Rays, Chowds, and most delightfully damn Yankees crushed beneath the mighty twig-like feet of the O's? Is this team being guided to victory by the benevolent ghosts of Paul Blair, Earl Weaver, or Billy Ripken? Or is the cruel universe setting up long-suffering fans for bitter, soul-crushing disappointment when these high-flying birds inevitably crash back to Earth? Anyhow, go Giants. The Orioles are having a fantastic year. They have the best record in the American League and the second best record in all of baseball, second only to the mighty Atlanta Braves, who are also having a fantastic year this year. So yeah, look, as an Orioles fan, it's not quite to the level of like how Cubs fans used to be or Red Sox fans used to be when they were under curses, supposedly. But it's of a similar mindset. An Orioles fan never gets too excited because there's always time for them to blow it. So we are getting relatively late in the season, like we are in the second half, and they're still doing great. So fingers crossed this keeps up and they make it to the postseason. And yeah, how far can they go? I would look, they can. They could go all the way. They have a great team. They could win the World Series. Am I placing any bets at this point? No. But yeah, they're having a really good year. And I think it's great. It's been 40 years since the last time we won a World Series. It's been 40 years since the last time the Baltimore Orioles won a World Series. So we're overdue. The Orioles have never been able to put together a dynastic run. Like they had an amazing, amazing team in the late 60s and early 70s. That's probably the best that the franchise has ever been for a like sustained multi-year period. And even then, I think they only won one World Series. Maybe two. If you count 66 as a part of that, then they won two World Series. They made it to the series more than that, but I think they only actually won one World Series. Um, so they've never been like the Yankees, where they can just rack them up year after year after year. So I wouldn't expect, even if they go all the way this year, I wouldn't expect it to happen again next year or the year after that. I'm just sort of enjoying it as it's going on, and hoping, keeping my fingers crossed, and hoping they don't blow it like they typically do. But yeah, it's been nice. It's been a nice change of pace to have the Orioles have a really, really good year. And again, you're always waiting for the other shoe to drop, and hopefully it won't this time. Brian Baker, hello, Steve. I had a question for you about the last episode of Strange New Worlds. Do you think that the creative team behind the scenes is trying to follow in the footsteps of DS9 and all the episodes about war and how it changes us? I had an uncle who served in the Vietnam War and came back as a change, as changed. I guess I had uncles who served in the Vietnam War and came back as changed men. I know people my age and younger who served in the Gulf Wars and in Afghanistan. My grandfather, who fought in World War II, seemed to be fighting in what was considered a just war, but in Vietnam and later wars, society seemed to have asked more questions about the effects of war than on the justification of it. Is this a sign that the future is getting closer to the ideal of Star Trek rather than the rule of the mob? I heard my uncle once say that old men send young men to war because old men don't pay the price of fighting. I'm an older man and I don't want to do that. Your thoughts? I mean, I would like to think that our ideas about war are evolving and slowly becoming more enlightened. But I mean, if we follow the Star Trek path, it's going to get a hell of a lot worse before it finally gets better. But then again, that's how it has always happened in history, too. I mean, if you look at the aftermath of World War II, which was the most devastating conflict in human history, there was a period, at least in much of the world, not in the entire world, obviously, but in much of the world, there was a prolonged period of peace after that and economic prosperity. And there was a sense of, oh, we've seen how bad it can get. We need to get a hold of this thing and we need to do this right. And we need to fix a lot of these problems. And that held out for a few years and people forgot about it all over again. And it started to build back up, like it had before World War II. But it does seem like there's a cataclysm, and then people are like, oh man, we need to do better. Like, we need to get our shit together and fix this. And they do for a little while, and then they forget, and things start happening again. So, hopefully each time we go through that cycle, we end up a little better off than we were at the beginning of the last cycle. But I honestly don't know. Um, and as for Strange New Worlds, I mean, really, Strange New Worlds has only done the one war episode. They've only done just the one from last week, the Under the Cloak of War with Dr. Mbenga, which I thought was a very good episode, and I thought was a very good episode dealing with war related themes. But I mean, that's one episode that Strange New Worlds has done about it. I don't know if we can quite compare it to Deep Space Nine yet, because Deep Space Nine returned to war themes again and again and again in its final 2 or 3 seasons, and it has not been a regular subject for Strange New Worlds at this point. So, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, it would be nice for that to happen. For it would be nice for future generations of old men to say, you know what, we're not going to send the young men or the young women, the young people, regardless, to war anymore. That would be nice. Reminds me of a classic Archie Bunker quote when he's yelling. He finds out, it's the classic Christmas episode, The Draft Dodger, where Mike and Gloria's friend from Canada comes down for Christmas dinner. And he's, of course, a draft dodger who is in Canada trying to evade the authorities after not going to the Vietnam War. And Archie finds out about this and is just appalled and is yelling and screaming. And at one point he says, if you ask the people in this country to say whether or not we want to go to war, you couldn't get a decent war off the ground that way. Of course they'd vote against it. Sure they would, because they don't want to get killed. That's why we leave it to the Congress, because them old quacks ain't gonna get killed. Like, it's the perfect expression of that attitude. Mr. Angel Cabot, Steve, it seems you slightly prefer Alex Kurtzman's version of the Star Trek universe over Gene Roddenberry's. Why? I wouldn't say that's true. I don't think I prefer. I don't. I know. There's a lot about the current generation of shows that I do really like. There are ways in which I prefer it. Like visually, I think it's far superior. I think the shows look a lot better now than they ever have. But that's not necessarily due to any particular genius on the part of Alex Kurtzman or anyone else who's involved in it. It's just the evolution of the art form, like TV shows and movies in general, when they're placed in the hands of competent artists, of course, look a lot better than they did 50, 60 years ago, just because the technology has advanced and the techniques are more sophisticated, and you can do more for less money than you could back then. And the budgets for TV shows and now streaming shows, and what used to be considered low budget movies, are a lot bigger now than they were back in the day. So, I mean, visually speaking, I prefer the current generation to a lot of the old stuff. But, I wouldn't say I prefer the current generation of Star Trek over the older versions. I guess the only version you could really fairly say that's Gene Roddenberry's version, and even that, it's not completely Gene Roddenberry's version, but the one that was most Gene Roddenberry's version was the original series and the first year or two of TNG. But then after that, it was kind of taken away from him, and it became a good show. But so no, I mean, I love classic Star Trek. I love the original series. So I certainly wouldn't say that I prefer like the current version of Star Trek that's now being produced over TOS. I think they both have their good points. There are things about them both that I love, and there are things about them both that I think don't work. And I don't think one is obviously super superior to the other. So no, I mean, I maybe because I have not made it my mission to trash the stuff that Alex Kurtzman is in charge of now, maybe because I have found a lot about it that I really enjoy and have praised it. Maybe you think that I must obviously like it better than the old stuff, but I don't. I like both, and they both have things that I think deserve to be recommended, and they both have things that I think deserve to be criticized and pointed out as not working. And I'm not sure if honestly, if in terms of like the effect that it's had and the meaning that it has to my life and to my fandom, if I had to choose between the two, I probably would choose the old stuff. But that's mostly because it's been with me longer, So no, I wouldn't say that I prefer that I have either a slight or a strong preference for the new version. Although I do, as I've said a bunch of times already, I do really enjoy it. Dan Drew Schmeichel. Wait, if you're a channel member and a patron, you can ask 2 questions? I won't abuse this loophole again, but just in case it's not the done thing, I am disguising my identity with a clever pseudonym. But my question is, if you somehow found out who I am, will I be getting blocked again? Took me 4 years to get the last block lifted. Yeah, but I finally figured it out, didn't I? Dan Drew. So I don't know why we have to keep bringing it up. You know what? Here's the thing. Sometimes the most important rules are the ones that are made when you didn't realize you would have to make them. Like how it says, do not eat on the back of those little silicate gel packs that come in new pairs of shoes and similar things. No, in all seriousness, if you or anybody else is kind enough and generous enough to want to be not only a Patreon patron, but also a channel member at the same time, and I know several people are, which I don't ask for and don't expect, but if that's what you want to do, and as long as you're doing that, you want to ask 2 questions, I suppose that is your privilege. I mean, you're paying me twice. So if you want to, if you pay me twice a month and you want to ask 2 questions per ask away, I suppose that is your privilege. So I will not fuss you about it if you're paying for it twice. Now, if I find out anybody's only paying for it once and they're dropping in multiple questions, then there's going to be hell to pay. Then there's going to be some do not eat action going on for damn sure, and you better believe that. Black Cover 95. Are there any Batman black and white stories you hold to high regard? Oh my God, yes. One of my favorite Batman stories ever is Perpetual Mourning, which is from Batman Black and White #1, the very first issue of the very first Batman Black and White miniseries. And I think it might actually be the first story, come to think of it. So, I mean, yeah, that entire first issue, that Batman Black and White #1, just as a whole, is to me one of the greatest Batman comics, one of the greatest single issue Batman comics ever published. Because not only does it have Perpetual Mourning, it also has that fantastic Bruce Timm story, Two of a Kind, about Two-Face, that is just phenomenal. So, yeah, Perpetual Mourning to me is one of the greatest Batman stories ever, ever. I used to want to. I think it's only an 8-pager, and I used to have this like dream of getting all 8 pages printed out on like poster sized paper and like hanging it on my wall. So I had like, posters of all 8 pages of Perpetual Mourning. I've never lived in a place where I had the wall space that I felt like I can commit like an entire wall just to hanging Perpetual Mourning on it. But that's how much I like that story. So yes, I would say wanting to hang it on my wall in its entirety counts as high regard. Yes, I love Perpetual Mourning. Joe McClory, during the last hangout, you brought up that people keep trying to get you into role playing. I honestly think this is because some of your stated likes, because of some of your stated likes, they think you could get into the hobby if you gave it a chance. I was wondering how many related hobbies you have tried. For example, collaborative storytelling, either exercises of it or posting in a fiction forum writing the same story, cooperative board or card games, improv groups, or anything else of the sort. No, I haven't done any of those, and I'm not particularly interested in any of them. I mean, I've co-written with people. Like, I mean, Dana and I have written things together, and Jason and I have written things together. And of course, the Ensign's log is a collaborative improv podcast where the three of us are making up the scenes as we go along with guidance from Jason. So that is a form of collaborative storytelling, but I don't think that's specifically like what you're referring to. And I've never like written a story by posting it in a fiction forum, or, I just not, that's like writers group stuff. I'm not really into writers groups. That sounds like writers group stuff. And again, like if just like with gaming, with anything else, like if being in a writers group helps you out and is something you enjoy, and doing exercises like that is, worthwhile to you, then I say have at it, go for it. I'm glad you found something that you enjoy, but it's never been my thing. And cooperate. I mean, there's 2 or 3 board games I've ever played in my life that I genuinely enjoy. So as far as cooperative board games, no. I mean, there's very few board games in general that I really enjoy. And same thing with card games. I'm just, no, not really. I'm not, I don't, I've never really been into any of those things, and I've never really wanted to be. So no, sorry. Hart Fetzko in Strange New Worlds season 2, episode 9. Could the Corleone family have given a better kiss of death to Captain Marie Battelle than the writers did in this episode? Is she a goner in episode 10? Do you think they'll use her life/death as a cliffhanger for season 3? With the strike, we'd have to wait 2 to 2.5 years to find out. This is my first time participating. I really enjoy your podcasts at all. Well, thank you very much, Hart. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I can't really give you much of an answer because I haven't watched the episode. I don't watch the new Strange New Worlds episodes until Saturday, because that's when Jason and I do our reviews, and we like to watch the new episodes together for the first time, before we do our reviews. So I have not seen it, so I can't tell. I will say I hope they don't do a cliffhanger, or if they do something like like the way they handled the end of last season, I thought was the way to do it, where they drop a little bit of like a cliffhanger at the end with #1 being arrested and like, oh no, what's going to happen? But it's not a cliffhanger like the end of Best of Both Worlds Part 1, where, it's Commander Riker says, Mr. Worf, fire, and then that's the end. And you're leaving. That's like an actual cliffhanger where like any moment now, disaster will strike. Like the characters are on the precipice of disaster, and that's the end. And now you have to wait until you see the conclusion. So if they do something to sort of drop a hook to pull you towards season 3. So there's something unresolved and you want to see what happens next, or you want to see how it works out, but it's not like a cliffhanger where it feels like the story is unfinished. I much prefer that to doing like, something where they leave you in the middle of the high drama, and then they're like, aha, you have to wait and see until the next season starts. I mean, obviously, I just mentioned Best of Both Worlds, which is one of the great Star Trek episodes ever, both parts. And it worked really well there. But for the most part, I'm not a fan of cliffhangers in anything other than like an actual movie serial, you know. But anyway, sorry I couldn't answer your question better because I haven't seen the episode yet. But thank you very much for becoming a supporter, and I'm glad you like my stuff, and I'm glad you like the podcasts. Thanks for listening. General Contact Unit Problem Child. The other day I was watching a streamer complain about Bill Maher, and I said something like, I hate him too, but I kind of wish more anti-SJWs would be like, yeah, screw the woke mob, but Trump is still a moron, you know? I've been rethinking what I said, and the thing I have to ask myself is, do you think the fact people like Bill Maher or Sam Harris are anti-Trump have any bearing on how their anti-woke fans vote? Like, Steve, do you think their fans just ignore that part and only pay attention to when they complain about pronouns or whatever? P.S. I seem to have characters left over, so here's a pic of my dog cuddling with his runt sister. So first of all, I did load the puppy pic. There's the puppy pic. Look at that. Oh, so cute. Who doesn't like a good puppy pic every now and then? I mean, I think I think for the most part, their audiences overlook the anti-Trump stuff. Like, because the thing is, like, I don't know. If you watch Bill Maher for his non-shitty opinions, if you watch or listen to Sam Harris for his non-shitty opinions, what, both of them? Like, there are other people who are way less problematic, who are way less cozy with like right-wing shittery that you could go to hear similar points being made. Like, you don't need, like, it's not like Bill Maher, the reasonable things that Bill Maher says, he is not the only person saying them. The tiny handful of reasonable things Sam Harris says, he is not the only one saying them. So if you're listening to Sam Harris regularly, or you're listening to Bill Maher regularly, you probably agree with most of what they say. I'm not saying that's the case for everybody. I'm not saying there aren't exceptions, but in general, I would say the average, like, devoted member of their audience probably agrees with most of what they say. And when they get to the, oh, and by the way, Trump sucks parts, most of those people probably just tune that out. That would be my guess. Again, there are always exceptions, but that would be my guess. But thank you for the puppy pic. Shazy, good evening, Steve. Where do you think male entitlement to women's attention and affection comes from? While such entitlement can come from overtly aggressive men who fear anything that would cause them or others to question their masculinity, it can come from more covert sources. For instance, I am an introverted individual, and it has taken me many years to befriend women and gain a lot of self-reflection to come to terms that in life you are not owed special attention or care from someone just for being nice, as that is the bare minimum, or by being a real man, as the latter is subjective and often toxic. How do we convince existing men and raise the next generation to treat women as actual human beings with agency instead of a trophy or status symbol? Thank you. Boy, if I knew the answer to that question. Oh boy, I wish I knew the answer to that question. As for where does it come from? It comes from our culture. Our culture reinforces that at every step of our development as men. And as women too, it tells women the opposite, that is your rightful place, that you are supposed to be objects of desire for men, and you're supposed to want that. And if something bad happens to you and a man does you some harm, or commits some kind of assault against you, that, well, you probably brought it on because you were either denying the man unfairly or you were enticing him and he had no choice but to act on his urges, because that's just how it works, right? Our culture reinforces this. You know, not even just specifically with gender roles. What you're describing in terms of like men growing up and feeling entitled to a woman's attention, or feeling like they're owed special favors because they were being nice, That's a transactional relationship. And we are trained from birth to view our relationships as transactional. And that's an incredibly sick thing. And those of us who are lucky enough to escape that and to realize there are better ways of doing things, um, are able to, to realize how, you know how destructive that is. But a lot of people a lot of people don't. A lot of people never escape that bubble, but it's something that that's reinforced over and over again as as we grow up, that your relationships are transactional, that you do for me and I'll do for you. And I was nice to you, so now you have to be nice to me. I have somehow involved you in a contract, even though you had no part in it and you didn't even know what was going on. Like, it doesn't matter. Your feelings, your consent, whatever, that doesn't matter, because I did a nice thing for you and now you have to reciprocate, right? It's not just when it comes to sex and relationships, but that is a part of it. And again, it's something that, like, how do you make people, how do you convince the next generation not to do that? The same way that those of us who don't think that way were educated to not think that way, through our upbringing, through our parents teaching us different lessons, through our friends, our community, our members of our social circle, uh, living in different ways, setting different examples for us, teaching us that actually individual people do have value as individuals and their rights need to be respected, and you are not owed attention or affection from anyone, no matter how you might feel about them. That's just not the way it works. And if your relationships are not based, if your personal relationships at least are not based on mutual feelings and mutual consent, then they don't really mean anything. And that's what you should strive for. You should strive to make connections with people, not impose yourself on people, not control people and try to force people to do what you want them to do, but meet people in the middle, form connections, form bonds, so that people want to spend time with you and you want to spend time with them, and they like you and you like them, and you want to make each other happy and do things for each other because it's just part of the nature of your relationship and your feelings for each other. So I mean, we need to continue to inculcate those values and those expectations into people if we want future generations not to view everything as transactional. And it's a big job. And, I know I certainly won't live to see it, but I mean, there's not an easy fix for it. It's just, we have to be better and we have to teach succeeding generations to be better the best we can. Michael Ridra is hyper fixated on My Adventures with Superman now. Sorry. Oh man, My Adventures with Superman is just so great. Really just consistently nailing it. I'm really glad they don't drag things out that other shows would milk for multiple episodes or even entire seasons, like keeping the secret identity from Jimmy and Lois, or this little fight they had. Also, maybe I'm just really petty, but I get a certain delight over the show doing something new to piss off right-wing fans each week. Last week, Lois was toxic. Now Mala and Brain are woke. Ha ha, eat shit, chuds. Anyway, I've also really liked the new takes on all the villains and was curious if there were any classic Superman villains you were hoping to see reimagined by this show. Oh God! Well, obviously Mixie would be great. Wouldn't Miss Yes be fantastic on this show? He would perfectly suit the style of it. Um, he's not necessarily thought of as a classic villain, but I've always really liked the villain Conduit. I think he didn't come around until the late 80s, early 90s, but Conduit, Kenny Braverman, was someone who was a childhood friend of Clark Kent from Smallville, who then grew up and an accident befell him and he became a supervillain. But he has he's almost like a Spider-Man villain, but for Superman, because he has that long-standing, very close personal connection to Superman. And I think a character like him would work really well in My Adventures with Superman. But yes, I agree with everything you say there. The new episode, which I just watched earlier today, was terrific. And yet I love the way they're progressing the relationships of the characters. I love the way they introduce things that pay off in future episodes, but they don't drag things out forever. Yeah, I thought Major Mala and Brain were fantastic in the new episode. Were really, really good. I'm completely on board with you. I agree with you totally. It's a great show. We are 6 episodes into a 10 episode season, and I really hope they do more after that, because it's become one of the most delightful surprises. Like, I had no expectations about this show whatsoever when I first watched it, and now it has very quickly become an excellent, excellent take on Superman that I look forward to watching every time there's a new episode, for sure. Thomas Jane Wright, aka, Black Body Economics. Hey, Steve, money breaks brains. Seriously, our landlords are millionaires and they do the craziest shit. These past few weeks, we have been dealing with half the house missing with no roof simply because they want to add 20 feet to the east side. It's not necessary, it's not practical by any means, and it is literally traumatizing. We just had 2 rainstorms that have damaged thousands of dollars worth of our personal property. My daughter's artwork, books, mattresses, $300 textbooks, encyclopedias, all sorts of stuff. One of the owners said, well, we'll just build a bigger room for her and replace everything. That is so beside the point. These are good people. I know them well, but this is how much money has warped their perspective. I have tons of stories like this, but I'm wondering if you personally have a story you'd like to share about how money has derailed somebody you know. No, I don't know anybody with that much money, so I can't speak to that at all. But I am very, very sorry to hear about these problems that you're having with your landlord. And I mean, it's frustrating. It would be easier, I guess, if they were assholes. But the fact that you know them and they are otherwise good people that have just been sort of pulled into la la land by having a lot of money, that's really frustrating. And it kind of goes back to the point that was touched on in the first question that Andrew asked, of the 2 questions that he submitted this time. About like how much money is an unethical amount, and it depends on, not only does it depend on how you behave, but it also depends on, do you lose perspective as a result of it, or do you keep perspective and realize, oh, I'm still a human being, I still live in society, you know um I need to maintain my connection to other people. I can't just be like, oh, money will fix everything, because that is that you know oh, don't worry, we'll replace everything. It reminds me of the book of Job, when at the end, the supposedly happy ending of the book of Job is, oh, and the Lord replaced everything that he lost. And yes, his wife and kids died, but he got remarried and had new kids. Okay. I mean, his original family that he loved are still dead for no reason, but sure, he got a new family, so I guess it's okay. Like, you're not really you don't really understand why it's tragic, do you? So yeah, that's what it made me think of. But no, I cannot think of any personal stories like that. So sorry, but like I said, I'm sorry that you have to deal with that. Russell, hey Steve, I hope this is okay, but I've been wanting to ask you this question for some time. I know I've recommended The Practice. Anyway, there is one episode. I won't spoil character development, but rather the day-to-day case and topic. Here goes. This episode is titled Police State. In short, 2 suspects are fleeing a scene. A cop has been critically wounded. They shoot one of the suspects in the arm. His running buddy gets away and contacts The Practice. Roll credits. In the episode, or in the hospital, suspect 1 is being tortured by police. The defense lawyers come in. They refuse to let them speak to their client. Finally, under duress, he points the finger at his running buddy. The prosecution explains, as a witness, he doesn't enjoy Fifth Amendment rights. Short of it anyways, running buddy points finger at suspect 1. They arrest suspect 1. Massive mess in court. Finally, prosecution offers 2 years or roll dice. We are left not knowing if he was guilty or not. My question is, what do you think of our system? I think too often prosecutors are pushed to get convictions rather than reach a just result. Like I know there are times, God, there have been so many true crime documentaries and podcasts and books written about cases like this where it turned out that a person was innocent and that the evidence against them uh, was weak at best, but the prosecutor went ahead with the case because of public pressure or pressure from the family or pressure from political offices higher up than them, where they were like, look, if that's your best suspect, then you've got to prosecute. We need a conviction. This case is too important. This case is too high profile. We need a conviction. And so they go after someone, even if they don't have the evidence that they would necessarily need to prove that they are actually the guilty party. They think, well, we can probably get a conviction, even if they themselves aren't sure that it's actually the guilty party, because they want the conviction. They don't care if the person is really the culprit or not. They have enough evidence that they can convince a jury that they're the culprit, and that's their job as they see it. So that part of the system is completely broken. That should never happen. That kind of thing should never happen. Both the defense attorney and the prosecution should care first and foremost about what the truth is, and if there's a crime involved, who actually did the crime. And if we don't think it's the person who is on trial, then they shouldn't be the one who goes to prison. Even if you think you can tell the story to the jury in such a way that they would convict them, So that part of the system, and not just that part, there's all kinds of parts of the system that are fucked up. But that part in specific, because I feel like that's the closest to what you're getting at with your question. Not a fan of that at all. Russell, not a fan of that at all. Okay, a couple more questions. This one is from Matt L. I'm eagerly awaiting your review tomorrow for the musical episode. As someone who loves musicals in general, I loved the episode. La'an's and Uhura's solos brought me to tears. I wish the Klingons had a full song. 10 out of 10. I understand if you don't want to upstage your own Saturday video, but what did you think, or what song was your favorite? Do you think they could pull it off again like Beverly had plays and such in TNGs? I hope they sing again somehow. Well, like I said earlier, I have not watched the episode, so I don't have a favorite song because I haven't seen any of it. Maybe they can find reasons to have certain cast members sing again, like in the context of another story, but doing a full musical episode feels like something that you should really only do once. Like, the show itself is not a musical show. Doing a musical episode is doing a musical episode once is like a fun departure, from the standard format. And I think if you do a good job, you can get away with it, and it'll be something fun that people remember. It's like, oh, remember the musical episode? But if you do it too many times, then you kill the gimmick. It's like one of my favorite old TV shows that I've done videos about and that I will continue to do videos about in the future is MacGyver, the original MacGyver. And MacGyver did an episode where MacGyver falls asleep and has a dream. And most of the episode is MacGyver's dream. And MacGyver dreams himself into a Western. So they do a Western episode of MacGyver that takes place like in the Old West in the 1870s or whatever. Cowboys, horses, ranches, etc. Western stuff. And it's justified because MacGyver has a dream. And it's a fun episode. It's a fun episode. And then the next season, they do another one. They do another Western episode that's very similar to the first one they did. And the second one's just not as good because they already did it. It's kind of a one-off gimmick. We'll do a Western episode where MacGyver has a dream. Oh, it turned out great. Let's do another Western episode where MacGyver has another dream. Okay, it just doesn't work as well. So I feel like the musical episode conceit is kind of the sort of thing, especially when you only do 10 episodes a season, and as a streaming series, if it gets 4 or 5 seasons, that's going to be a really good run. We'll be lucky, even though it's been very successful and very popular. If it gets 5 seasons, I think that's a pretty good run for a streaming show. So, that's 50 episodes. If they do end up doing 5 seasons of 10 episodes apiece, that's 50 episodes. You really want 2 musical episodes out of 50? That, I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but that's a lot for the exact same gimmick. So, but having other ways for the characters or the actors to sing, I'm sure that would be great just not a full-on musical episode. Caitlin L, I managed to squeak this in. I got distracted for hours working out parts of a cover of Spock's signature song from Strange New Worlds episode 9, season 2, episode 9, speaking of which. Anyway, my question to you, Steve, is as a writer, how important do you feel it is to drop clues to tilt ambiguous endings toward one reading or another? Does it bother you when people dismiss structural or other textual yet non-narrative clues in stories which seem highly telegraphed when analyzed from those angles? My mind's been hopped up on narrative ambiguity for a bit over a week now, which wasn't caused by, but certainly has been enhanced by Strange New Worlds Season 2, Episode 8. I mean, it depends on the intentions of the writer. Like, I do think if you want, because like part of what makes ambiguity so compelling when it's well done is that you can read an episode in a way where it does feel like you can be led to a particular ending, you know, despite the ambiguity. Like that, it's not vague. It's not vagueness. It's not like the episode or the story resolves on a note where it's like, and then who knows what happened next. You know, it's more like it ends on a note of, well, we don't know for sure what happens next, and we can't know for sure, but there are clues that lead us to a particular conclusion. We'll never know if that's what really happened, but it might have been, right? And sometimes if it's a really well-structured story, there can be clues leading you to contradictory conclusions. And then you'll be like, oh man, there's two equally compelling possibilities, and we'll never know what actually happened, right? And in those cases, yes, I do think structural clues, I think little hints here and there are very important because that's how you create those expectations. That's how you lead the audience toward one conclusion or another. And I mean, it does bother me when people dismiss those clues like that, but it bothers me more when people treat it as though it's not an ambiguous ending, or when they try to interpret it as though it's not, you know, or as though the ambiguous ending was somehow some kind of a mistake or something. Like when, like I remember the big one, you know, 10 years ago was the ending of Inception, when, you know, he spins his totem at the end, and then before it falls, he sees his kids, so he walks away, and then the movie ends. The totem starts to wobble a little bit, but we don't see it fall. Like the movie deliberately cuts to black and the movie is over before we get the resolution of, is this still a dream or is this real? Right. And that's the point. The point is, at the end of the movie, it doesn't matter whether it's still a dream or not, because Cobb is happy. He's reunited with his kids. He walks away from the totem. He spins it to see if it's still a dream or not. And when he sees his kids, he forgets about it and he walks away. That's the important part, not whether or not it's really a dream. And people who insisted on trying to drag whether or not it was a dream, like drag some kind of definitive answer to that question out of the movie, to me, miss the entire point of the ending. The ambiguity is there to reinforce the importance of the father being reunited with his kids and how that's what's really important to him, not whether or not, you know, the totem falls. We cut away before we see it because ultimately it doesn't even really matter. What matters is Cobb and his kids. So when people try to say like, but is it a dream or not? That doesn't matter. That's not the point. You're misunderstanding the purpose of the ending. So that kind of thing matters, or that kind of thing annoys me more than people who, you know, sort of dismiss what seem to be clues in the narrative leading up to it. But yeah, those kinds of things are very important. And finally, last patron member question from Sant Merck. Hey, Steve, is it all right if I ask about the Collision reviews and what happened there? Were they just not working for you? What do you think of Collision overall so far? Before it started, I thought it could be a solution to a lot of the problems I saw in the company, and I think it has been. I think it's been healthy for the company and actually made both shows better, even if it hasn't addressed all of AEW's problems. Do you think it has helped any of the company's problems? Well, first of all, actually, I don't know if you saw it or not, but I in the video I posted earlier today, I mentioned that I stopped doing those day after Collision reviews, mostly because I just don't have time. Like it cut too far into my production schedule, especially on Sundays when we're recording a podcast in the afternoon, or even more so if it's the last Sunday of the month and I have my patron and members hang out that day. Like I just have too much work to do on the weekends, and I have too much work that I need to get done or get started for the coming week that I couldn't justify the time it took on Sunday to do that. And also they weren't being watched by that many people. So it is what it is. But I think Collision overall has been fantastic. It's my favorite wrestling show. It's everything that I had hoped Dynamite would be when it started, but for the most part wasn't. I think every episode of Collision so far has been better than almost every episode of Dynamite they've ever done. I mean, with the exception of the episodes of Dynamite that have had like really, really fantastic matches, like, the Bryan Danielson 1 hour draws, that like those things where it's like, oh my God, that's one of the best matches of the year on it. Like, and I mean, God, Collision had two of those in a row with the FTR versus Juice Robinson and Switchblade White matches. Those both 2 weeks in a row had two of the best matches, not just two of the best matches of this year, but two of the best matches I've seen on TV in years and years and years. Two of the best tag team matches I've seen, God, in decades. Like they're, fantastic. And no gimmick matches. No gimmick matches. Like, I mean, unless you count 2 out of 3 falls as a gimmick for the second one, but they were just, fantastic. I mean, as good as those FTR versus Briscoes matches were, and those were amazing. Don't get me wrong. I take nothing away from those. All 3 of those matches were fantastic. But I think the FTR versus Juice and Switchblade tag matches on Collision were even better. Like, I thought they were amazing. They're the best AEW tag matches they're the best tag matches in the history of AEW. Yeah. So I think Collision has been great. I didn't really like the ladder match last week, but then again, I don't really like any modern ladder matches. I don't like the car crash matches. I mean, I think I'm still a fan of both guys that were in it. I think Andrade and Buddy Murphy are both talented guys. And I've enjoyed them on Collision in general, but I didn't think the match was good. And I thought the justification for it of, oh, he stole Andrade's mask, so now they put the mask up over the ring. It's like, that's a really, really thin justification for having a ladder match. Like, really? They're fighting over the mask and it's got to be a ladder match? Like, it feels like they were digging for an excuse to do a ladder match, which is how almost all ladder matches feel, no matter who does them. It's one of the reasons why I don't like them. But other than that, I think the shows have been great. I thought the tag match last week with FTR versus MJF and Adam Cole was excellent, was fantastic. I think CM Punk's stuff has been great so far. He's done a great job like playing off of the crowds, where like a lot of people in the crowd seem to really hate him, but he gets kind of a mixed react. People chant for him and people chant against him, and he plays off of that dynamic just beautifully. He's done a great job since he's come back, and he's had good matches as well since he came back. So I love Collision. I think it's great. I'm really looking forward to it tomorrow night for sure. And that's the last question. Woohoo! And it was a wrestling question. So there you go. And of course, I've still got my American Dragon t-shirt on from earlier when I did the video before. So yeah, thank you very much, everybody, for the questions. And now for the last portion of the show, let's turn to the live chat and see what everybody wants to talk about and what's on everybody's mind. Oh, Stuffy Short. Yes, thank you, 255 AD. I forgot about the Stuffy Short. Yes, there will be a Stuffy Short. God damn, I can't believe I almost forgot the Stuffy Short. Hi, Dana. Okay, before I turn to the chat full time, I do have a Stuffy Short to share with you, and thank you for the reminders, everybody. Don't tell Stuffy that I almost forgot to show the Stuffy Short. Okay, I will show the new Stuffy Short, and it again, as is the usual way this works, it will go up on my channel tomorrow as a standalone YouTube short, but you get the premiere tonight, right now. So please join me in watching a brand new Stuffy and Friends short.
I'm heading out to pick up something for dinner. Do you want anything? I thought I'd try that new vegetarian seafood place.
Satan of the Sea? I'm writing a script. Give me a minute and I'll come with you.
Okay. Do you have a plan B for what you'd do if for some reason YouTube stopped being a viable career?
My needs are few. I could probably make ends meet going door to door selling grit.
Do they even still publish that magazine?
I don't know.
Do you have a plan C?
What do you think?
Well,
My plan B was selling grit, dude. Who doesn't love a good grit reference in 2023, eh? There you go. And by the way, to answer a question I see in the chat, Danny Kors asks, will future Stuffy Shorts have Jack or Hans? Yes, actually, I am probably next week, if I have time, I am going to shoot another batch of Stuffy Shorts because I have one more that's done. I have one more that's ready to go for the next Ask Away. And then after that, I'm going to have to make some more. I have a bunch of them written. I just need to start shooting them and editing them again. So the next batch that I shoot will have a couple of appearances of Jack. Yeah. And Hans will show up eventually too. But right now, the next batch has, I think, 2 episodes maybe that will have Jack. And so Jack will be appearing very soon. Not in the next one, but maybe in the one after that. We'll see. But yes, there are some Stuffy Shorts featuring Jack coming up. And I haven't written any with Hans yet, but there will be ones with Hans as well. So yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Dana, what about Cutco knives? I could sell those instead of grit. Yeah, that's a possibility. That's a possibility. I could go door to door and sell encyclopedias, you know. I did have a brief unsuccessful stint in my early 20s as a vacuum salesman. Didn't sell a single vacuum, hence unsuccessful, but I suppose I could turn back to that line of work. So yeah, there are possibilities. Yes, Mark, Silver Age comic book callback, Grit. Yes, Grit. The magazine of rural America. Yes, absolutely. Which I looked up after I wrote that, is no longer being published as a magazine as far as I know, but does have a website still. So anyway, 25 AD says, been watching anime-based Tekken 3 I played as a kid. A lot of fans are annoyed that they didn't include all the character backstories from the game. Is that unreasonable? Yes. Yes, that is unreasonable. Kirak 2011 with a super chat, which is part 1 of 2. And there's the second part. So there we go. Thank you for the super chats, by the way, my friend, as always. So in short, my question was, what is worse, cops or our system? Well, cops are part of the system. It's hard to separate them. I mean, the problem with policing isn't individual police. The problem with policing is the system. I mean, yes, there are individual cops who are bastards just in and of themselves, but the real problem with policing is the system and the way it works. And that's part of the criminal justice system. So the problems with policing are part and parcel of the problems with the broader system. So it's really hard for me to separate the two. 285 AD says, any theories on why baseball died out in that universe? Which universe? Like the Star Trek universe? Probably for the same reason it's going to die out in our universe eventually, because people just stop watching it. It waned in popularity. People started to regard it as too slow, as too boring, And so it went away because the people didn't deserve it. They didn't appreciate it. They didn't deserve it. So it left. Cisco appreciated it, though, didn't he? Yeah, he did. Dana says, do you think WGA or SAG should include AMTP publicly apologizes as part of their list of demands? Yeah, just so they can give them something to throw off the table to make it look like more of a negotiation. Yeah, because there's no way they're going to do that. There's no way that the studios are ever going to go for it. And by the way, we're sorry for causing the strike. They're never going to do. Even if it wouldn't cost them a dime, they'd never do that. But you could put it in there in the list of demands so you have something you can give up during the negotiation. Yeah, absolutely. And earlier than that, it was 255 AD who said, do you think the Futurama writers thought they'd ever have to cash the check about Amy and Kif's kids emerging from the swamp 20 years later? Probably not. Probably not, because I mean, who thinks that you're still going to be doing the show 20 years later, and that the show will have gone away and come back enough times that you'll have had to come up with like a time travel gimmick, or messing with the flow of time, whatever, to justify one of the reboots or one of the returns, which would allow you to acknowledge the passage of 20 years of time while also keeping the characters the same age. And yeah, I don't think they ever thought they would have to do that, but it was a pretty good episode. Um, Anonymous Science says, what are your thoughts about superhero comics that get aligned to their TV and movie versions? The Ouroboros of a comic based on a show based on the comic. Needless capitalistic corporate cross marketing? In a lot of cases, but not always. It could be that the show or the movie or whatever that it's adapted to did something that was an improvement on the source material. And so the source material adjusted to that. But more often than not, yeah, it's probably an attempt at synergy, especially with comic books, with comic book sales being so god awful for the last 20 years. Like they'll do anything if they think by making the comics more like the movies or the popular TV show that they'll get more people to buy it. Then that's what they'll do. Like a lot of it is just sheer, desperate attempts to get people to buy the comic. Another super chat from Kirok, who says, by the way, Steve, if all patrons and members could ask 2 questions, you'll be here for 6 hours. Well, no, only the people who are both. There's not that many people who are both patrons and members. Only the people who are both at the same time. And something tells me most people, even most of them, like even Andrew, probably won't take advantage of that. Like, because honestly, I mean, do you really? And look, I love you if you do, and I appreciate you, and thank you so much for being a supporter, whether you're a patron or a member or whatever. But I mean, do you really have that many questions for me that you can add? That you must submit multiple questions to a single episode of Ask Away? If you want to, and you are both a member and a patron, I mean, that's fine. I'm not going to tell you you can't, but do you really have that many questions? I am salty that no one watches baseball, some random geek, even though I don't watch it that much. But I'm still pissed off that other people don't watch it. Logan Stone says, did you ever see Captain Marvel's racist first comics? No, I didn't. There's the chat. Sorry about that, Black Cover 95. I didn't see Captain Marvel's racist first comics. I've seen some somewhat racist Spirit comics. Unfortunately, there was a supporting character in the Spirit who was just just someone who we would recognize today as just a horrifically racist caricature of a black person. But I don't think I've seen the racist early Captain Marvel comics. But I don't doubt your word that they are there. 255 AD says, is it weird that I never hated women even when I was at the height of the right of my social isolation in like 2018? Like I was the ideal incel target, but I was always that's nonsense. No, I don't think it's that unusual. I've never hated women. I mean, no, I don't, I don't think it's that unusual. I mean, I think that we need to be mindful and aware of the incel thing and of the absolutely unfathomably shitty attitudes toward women that are sort of instilled in young men. I don't think we should treat it as though it's not a problem when very clearly it is. But it's also not everybody. I think we need to remember that like not every teenage boy who can't get a date becomes an incel. A lot of them are probably more like you, who are like, yeah, it sucks that I can't get a date, but it's not the girl's fault. I mean, it's probably me. I'm probably just an asshole or, or a loser or whatever. Dana says, do you study any languages on Duolingo? Nope. I remember 2 years ago, I was playing it with you, where we would both do it. Like we would, if we were like chatting or on a Zoom call or something, we would play it at the same time. But I kind of stopped doing that after the first couple weeks. I think I think I was doing German. But I didn't get very far. I just, I don't really care. Height, not right. Sorry. Yeah. I thought that's what you meant, 20580. Um, Bolas de Frail. Greetings from Argentina. I want to thank you. I have improved my English listening to your videos, and it's good for my job. Well, I'm glad I can help. I, I'm glad. Apparently, my English is good enough to help non-native speakers improve their English. So thank you very much. I'm very glad to help. Here's a super chat from Geigen Greg. Not sure if you've mentioned what are some YouTubers, if any, that you enjoy watching in your off time. I've mentioned it a time or two. I mean, there are people that I'm friends with that I kind of know whose stuff I like to watch, like Jessie Gender. I try to catch her stuff if I can, if I have time. And if there's like a new philosophy tube video, I'll try to watch. I'll try to watch that. I catch some more news fairly frequently. Like Cody and I don't know each other; we're not friends, but I think he's great. And if there's some more news video up, I try to catch that if I have time. Um, I really like Ryan George and pitch meetings. Those almost always make me laugh. Um, and there are others I'm sure that I can't think of that I can't think of off the top of my head, but that I catch if I'm looking to watch something that's not super long that won't take up a lot of time. Or if it's something like that I watch regularly, like one of Jesse's videos or like a some more news video. But I don't watch a ton of YouTube, honestly. I watch it here and there, but there's not like a ton of channels that I watch regularly because I just don't watch all that much. Um, 255 AD says, how disturbing is it that Picard season 2 thought it appropriate to put in a reference to the Bell riots? It's still totally plausible the US will start doing that in the next years. Yeah, I mean, it's not like it's out of the question, right? So it's a little disturbing that we are not only are we close to the calendar date that the Bell riots are said to have happened, but conditions in society are such that it really doesn't seem that far fetched. Yeah, it's too bad. It's too bad. Um, um, Ada Trant says, in what time period would you like the next Star Trek series to be set? I've answered this question before. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me because I don't think the time period should matter. I mean, I think the time period makes a difference based on like what do you want the uniforms to look like? You know, do you want the Klingons to be good guys or bad guys? Like, other than that, I don't think it should matter what time period it is, because they've gone ahead and established some things about the early 25th century with the Picard show. I don't see any reason why the next show can't be set roughly in that era. I'm not talking about Star Trek Legacy. I'm not enthused about the possibility of a Star Trek Legacy show at all, especially if Terry Matalas is show running it. I just don't think that will be at all what I'm after in a Star Trek show after season 3 of Picard. But that era, I don't see why that shouldn't be the era of the next show. But ultimately, it doesn't matter. What matters is the show and the story of the show. It can be, circa the original series. It can be circa the original series movies. It can be, post TNG movies. It can be 32nd century, like Discovery's recent seasons, and like apparently the Starfleet Academy show is going to be. I don't care. I care about the story and the characters, So it doesn't really make a difference to me. I think I've said before, like if it was up to me, I might set if somebody gave me a Star Trek show, if Paramount said, make a Star Trek show, do whatever you want, I might set mine during somewhere in the original series movie era solely because I like those uniforms. Like that would be it. The story would have nothing to do with anything that happens in any of those movies. It would be a completely separate, independent story that I would make up. It would be my own stuff set in the Star Trek universe, and I would set it during that era because I like the aesthetic, because I like the uniforms, and because I like the way the Enterprise looked in Star Trek 6. So I would kind of aim for a more modern interpretation of that sort of aesthetic for my show. But that's the only reason why I would set it at any particular time period, because the story would be the story of the show. It would not be, let's catch up on stuff that other people did in other Star Trek shows. I don't give a shit about that. It would be my show that I would make up. But I do like those uniforms. I really do. I do like the monster maroons. Logan Stone, I think just because it's going to be a Starfleet Academy show, I don't think it's going to be lacking in adventure. No, I mean, I'm curious about the Academy show. I'm much more interested in a potential Starfleet Academy show than I am in the possibility of a Star Trek Legacy show. I would much rather see the Academy show than that. Mark Boyd, I didn't know that. There's a comic book artist from San Francisco named Gabrielle Bell in real life, so we should be worried. Well, keep an eye. Anonymous Science says, I think I found the role-playing game for you. Revised Recon. You play American specialists in Vietnam shooting racistly depicted Vietnamese. Boy, that sounds great. That's such a great pitch. Steve, I know you don't like role-playing games, but what if I told you I found a game that's not just a role-playing game, but it's jingoistic and super racist? Now what do you say? Like, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. Sign me up. Like, oh, you didn't say it was racist. Oh shit, then forget it. I'm 100% on board. That's fantastic. It sounds like an awful fucking game. Caitlin L says, by the way, Steve, my question was actually brought on by a discussion I had where I said Data almost definitely tried to shoot the Collector who kidnapped him, given the structural clues and beats. But there was enough ambiguity that the other person insisted Data didn't do it because he couldn't and wouldn't ever murder someone. Oh, okay. See, that to me, that's not nearly as ambiguous. To me, I think the episode is clearly telling us Data shot that guy. Like, you see, I mean, he pulls the trigger, like the gun fire, or no, the gun doesn't fire. We see him about to shoot it, and then O'Brien says the gun is in a state of discharge, right? Or do we actually see the gun start to fire when he energizes? I can't remember, but it's obvious that Data shot that guy or was intending to shoot that guy before he got beamed out. To me, that's not really ambiguous. And like, if it's not, like, the ending doesn't make any sense. The ending doesn't make any sense any other way. Because Data lies to Riker. Like, that's the point of the ending. Data is more human than he realized he was. He has proven Fajo wrong. Fajo says, you can't murder me because you don't know how, because you're not human enough to do that. You're just a robot. You just do what you're programmed to do. And then Data does a thing that he shouldn't be able to do based on his programming and attempts to kill the guy, right? And then he lies to cover it up when Riker says, hey, your gun had gone off. It looked like it, what happened there? And Data lies and says, oh, something must have happened during transport. And then he has that final scene with Fajo when Fajo is in the holding cell that ends with Data saying, I'm just an android, which now we know isn't exactly true because he tried to murder that guy. Or at least kill him back. Whether you just define it as murder or not is a different matter. But he tried to kill him back for the things he had done. So I don't find that I don't know what your friend is talking about. I mean, maybe it's, yeah. I think it's clearly meant that we're supposed to read that as Data shot that guy. I don't think as far as that goes, maybe it's ambiguous as to whether or not the gun actually went off by the time the transporter beam came on, but I don't think that really matters. The point is Data had decided to kill that guy, and if they hadn't beamed him out right then, he was going to do it. To me, that's not ambiguous at all. And the fact that as your friend's argument saying, he didn't do it because he couldn't and wouldn't, that your friend has missed the point of the episode, has missed the point of that ending. Yes, Data isn't supposed to be able to do that, but he does it anyway. and then he lies to cover it up because he has transcended his programming. And then there's the irony of the last line when he says he hasn't, when he says to Fajo, I'm just an android. You know, yeah, no, I think your friend has misinterpreted the ending of the episode. Yeah. Does the gun fire, Kirok? Yeah. Dana, jingoistic and racist. Is it based on Lord of the Rings? Ha ha! It doesn't have quite the sting it should, because I know Dana is much more of a fan of Lord of the Rings than I am, which is to say I'm not a fan of it at all. But yeah. Let me see. Oh, Yannick Muller, the ending of Lost in Translation. Speaking of ambiguity, yeah, exactly. We don't get to hear what he says. He whispers something in your ear. We don't get to hear what it is. We're not supposed to hear what it is. It doesn't matter. Like, the ambiguity, the not knowing is part of the beauty of it. Absolutely. I agree. Great movie. Speaking of Lord of the Rings, that's the movie that should have won Best Picture that year instead of fucking Return of the King, which was the worst one. Anyway, there was something else. Oh, Hobo Zero. Hey, Steve, thanks for some of your videos about trans topics. They were a big help to my dad, who just needed to hear that stuff from someone who was demographically like him. Thanks for being an ally. Well, I'm glad I could help. I'm glad I could help your dad. I appreciate hearing that. Okay, here's a super chat from Kirak to clear this up. Data did fire, but due to his ethical program, he realizes if he doesn't kill Fajo, he would kill others. Yeah, okay, so look, yes, you're right. He does, because he's kind of thinking through it as he does it, right? He's sort of saying to himself, I cannot allow this to continue. So his ethical program sort of forces him into an impossible choice where either he cannot kill Fajo and potentially allow Fajo to continue to inflict suffering on others as he goes about his business, or he can kill, because Data has no expectation of being found or being rescued. He doesn't know that the Enterprise is on its way. Or he can kill Fajo, which would be a technical violation of his ethical programming, but would also be fulfilling his ethical programming in another way, because by killing Fajo, he would be protecting all of Fajo's potential future victims. So yes, yes. 285 80. I think your comments are showing up. Or maybe not all of them. I don't know. If you said something recently, I guess I don't see it. I saw the one where you said you were 24 in 2019, not a teenager. I think that's the last one in the chat that I saw. But anyway, and look, and as I say quite often, if I don't acknowledge every single one of your comments, it's nothing personal. There's a whole bunch of people in here, so I may not respond to every single thing you say. It's nothing personal. I'm not mad at you. It's just, there's a lot of people here. Yeah, Caitlin. Just goes to show how powerful it is that we can still debate this after 30 years. Yeah, I mean, and yeah, I mean, there are some episodes that are like that, but I don't think that's one of them. Like, I think you have it exactly right. Logan Stone, would you say Star Trek's big point is that they have phasers but set them to stun, but could just as easily set them to kill, so the phaser is symbolic? I don't know if that's the big point, but I think that's part of the point. Yeah, I think the existence of non-violent measures and even non-lethal violent measures, I do think that's part of the point. But I don't know if it's the main point of Star Trek, but I do think it's very important. Anonymous Science says, I assume the answer is no, but since you don't like Lord of the Rings, have you ever read any Michael Moorcock? He writes fantasy that is famously not like Lord of the Rings. I don't need Moorcock. I've got plenty. And no, I've never I've never read it. I've never even heard of him actually. Um, Super chat from Geigen Greg. It bugs me when works of fiction have a particular evil villain go, ah, hero, if you kill me, you'll be just like me, which is patently untrue. Yeah, usually it is. Like, it's not nearly that simple. Like, if Superman killed Lex Luthor after he had been Superman for like 15 years, I mean, yeah, that would be a violation of his ethics. Like, it would be bad, but it doesn't make Superman just like Lex Luthor. Like, if Lex Luthor has been doing evil for 15 years and Superman has been doing nothing but good for 15 years, and then Superman finally just throws up his hands and says, you know what, to hell with this guy, and breaks Lex's neck and throws him into the sun. Yeah, that's not good, but it doesn't mean Superman is exactly like Lex Luthor. No, sorry. That's not the way it works. Um, Danny Lajai says, also, why does La'an have to be related to Khan? Her same story could be told with a different new evil ancestor. Yes, it could. I agree. It could. Um, I think the Khan thing doesn't. I don't think it hurts. It doesn't bother me as much as it would in another show. Mostly because I think Strange New Worlds is a good show, and it just gets away with it for that. Because it's sort of like there's the rule of funny and there's the rule of good. And if your show is good, I can forgive it. Other things that I wouldn't forgive a not as good show. But in general, I would rather them do what you suggest, which is, have her be the descendant of another infamous dictator that we've never heard of before, that the creators of Strange New Worlds invented themselves. But, Khan is like a big thing in Star Trek. It's like an instantly recognizable name, so they went with that. And like I said, the show is good enough that it doesn't bother me. And I do think they have used her relation to Khan very well so far in the show. Um, hey, Michael Handeline. David Colby says, you know what bugs me about Star Trek canon? We've already had a eugenics war without anyone needing to change any timelines. It was called World War II. Now, that would be a pretty good punchline if it turned out the eugenics war that they were talking about was actually World War II. Super chat from Stephen Clenard. It's come to my attention that Billy Ripken isn't actually dead yet. My bad, hard to tell sometimes. I just let that one go. I assumed you meant Cal Sr. because Cal Sr., Billy's dad, is dead. But yes, Billy Ripken, as far as I know, is still alive. So, much to the chagrin of the Ripken family. I'm kidding. I'm sure Billy is fine. I'm sure he's a good dude. I don't know what Billy's deal is. I have no reason to doubt any aspect of his character. Yeah, but yes, Billy Ripken is still alive. 2-5 AD says Kevin Logan and Jesse Gender had a Twitter fallout, and I was thinking, who will Steve side with? And my emotional counselor was like, that's not how people view friendships. Yeah, I don't even know about this. I don't know what they're fighting about or anything. I like them both. I don't really care. I don't anticipate any situation where I would have to choose one over the other. I would have to be, okay, I'm just Jesse's friend now, or I'm just Kevin's friend now. I honestly have no idea what they're fighting about or what the deal is. So whatever. But no, I have no plans right now to side with either one exclusively. Logan Stone says in Star Trek the Motion Picture, Spock is shown as having too many emotions and then he saves the day. Is that the message of Star Trek? That too many emotions save the day? No, again, I don't think there is like the message of Star Trek. There's a bunch of I think if there is one central message of Star Trek, and there's not one, there's millions of messages of Star Trek, but if there was like the most important defining central message of Star Trek is diversity is a strength. And when we eventually are able to overcome our bigotry and prejudice and intolerance, that is when we will be able to take the next step as a civilization and truly realize our potential. That's, if anything, is the message of Star Trek. It's that. It's the embracing of diversity and multiculturalism and the many different variations and flavors of humanity in terms of nationality, in terms of religion, in terms of ethnicity, in terms of race, in terms of gender, and all variations of identity. Once we can learn to embrace and include everybody and view that as a strength, that is when we will, sort of ascend as a people. That's much more important than they set the phasers to stun or Spock saves the day when he learns to embrace his emotions. Although I do think part of the point of Spock is that even though Spock is mostly the super logical guy, he comes to realize through the many different versions of Spock that we have seen that his emotions are an important part of who he is, that, he cannot live to the exclusion of emotion. Like in the motion picture, he's going through that Vulcan ceremony at the beginning to purge all emotion, and he decides not to do it because he realizes, I don't want to do this. Like, this is my emotions, even though I keep them in check and I control them with my discipline, my emotions are a part of me, and that of course helps to give him the insight at the end that lets them realize what they need to do to sort of diffuse the threat of V'ger. Some random geek, which Mountain Dew flavor is my favorite? Just classic Mountain Dew. This that I'm drinking right now is Baja Blast because that was all they had when I went shopping that week. So I have a carton or a case of Baja Blast in my fridge now that I'm working on, and it's fine. I don't mind it, but I like the original. And of course, I get zero sugar, but I like original Mountain Dew. Super chat from Kirak 2011. I'm still in awe of thinking Khan as being Hitler. Would you imagine a group of Nazis existing beyond to the 24th or 23rd century? If Kirk is smart, he'll shove them out the nearest airlock. Yeah. I mean, that's probably... I love tea too, Kirak. I drink tea as well. I don't drink nothing but Mountain Dew, but I just happen to have a Mountain Dew right here. But yeah, and yes, 255 the stream will end very soon. Yes. Anyway, about Kirak's super chat. Yeah. I mean, now that we have sort of established that Khan was basically like Hitler, yeah, once Kirk realized who he was, once they woke him up from the Botany Bay and they realized, oh shit, that's Khan Noonien Singh, at the very least, he should have just put him right back to sleep. If not, blown up that whole ship and just, said, okay, nope, fuck that. We're not doing that. Yeah, for sure. I like Earl Grey tea, some random geek, but I don't drink it regularly. But I've had it in the past, and it's a very good tea. Yeah. So anyway, it is time to draw the festivities to a close. So if anybody has any final comments or questions or whatever, go ahead and throw them in the chat, and I'll take one last look after I get through my plugs and etc. First of all, don't forget charitylinks.page, which is maintained by our pal Some Random Geek. Go there to find links to help out some friends of ours who need a helping hand. If you have a few extra dollars lying around and you want to pass them on to someone in need, that is a great resource. And please make use of that if that's what you want to do. We encourage that very strongly. Also, don't forget, if you want to support my channel, you can become a patron by going to patreon.com/Steve Shives, or by clicking the join button here on the YouTube page to become a channel member, or as Andrew demonstrated earlier, if you want and you really love me and you don't just want to give me a larger Patreon pledge or a larger membership pledge, you can do both. There's nothing stopping you from doing both. I don't suggest that or encourage that, but I'm not going to tell you not to. I'll take the money. But either way, whether you become a patron or a member, one of the perks is you get to submit questions ahead of time for Ask Away live streams, and I answer those in the first part of the show. And also you get the link to join us in our monthly patron and member hangout sessions that I do for an hour on the last Sunday of every month. And also, if you pledge $5 a month or more, you get a shout out at the end of a Trek Actually video. So those are some of the perks that you can enjoy. for being a patron or a member. And thank you very much to everybody who is a patron or a member, because I could not do this without you. And also, don't forget that if you enjoy my YouTube stuff, I'm also on a couple of awesome podcasts that are a part of the Lemmy Listen family of podcasts created by the great Jason Harding. Jason and I together do the Late Seating podcast, which is a movie review podcast. Where we take a look at classic films and see if they deserve their reputations, be those reputations good or bad. The new episode of Late Seating is out this week. It is up for your listening pleasure right now. It is our review of Moulin Rouge, a movie which I think is absolute garbage, and I don't like a single second of it, but probably some of you disagree. If you're curious as to why I despise it so much, you can listen to our review of Moulin Rouge on the new episode of Late Seating. I think it's a really good episode. And also, the Ensign's Log, the Star Trek themed comedy podcast that I do along with Jason and our very own Dana Cole, who is also in the chat and is brilliant, of course, on the show, where Dana and Jason and I play characters in the Star Trek universe. And currently our show sort of takes place in the background of Star Trek TNG, where TNG stuff that happened in the actual episodes will be sort of referenced or be, either will have just happened or will be happening alongside of our stories that are going on in our show. And it's a really fun show. And if you like my Star Trek stuff, and especially if you like the funnier Star Trek stuff that I do, I think you'll really enjoy the Ensign's Log. So please give it a listen. Links to the podcasts are in the video description. Now let me take one last look at the live chat before we wrap things up. Let me see here. Here is a super chat from Gygun Greg, who says, I hope the new Star Trek has Klingons and Spock and Khan and references to Kirk and doesn't take place further in the future and Q comes back. And that's almost as good as, hey, play this RPG where it's a racist Vietnam game. That's perfect. Yes. Thank you for the super chat, Greg. Let me see here. See if I missed any other questions or comments, etc. Bruce Sinclair, why does my bedroom TV keep turning on by itself? Sounds like you got a poltergeist there. Or yeah, Bruce. It sounds like you got a poltergeist there, Bruce. Caitlin, if a tree falls in a forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? We will never know. Unless someone puts a tape recorder in there. Then we can listen back to the, maybe. I don't know. A tape recorder. How fucking old am I? And Bruce, yeah, Jason's character used to go by the code name Barkley, and my character used to go by the code name Riker, but now in the more recent episodes we use our characters' real names. But originally in the first season or two, when our characters were going by code names, Jason was Barkley and I was Riker. Some random geek, do you like Dr. Pepper? Not really. I'm not a big fan. So, okay, there we go. I think that'll do it, everybody. Thank you all so much for watching. I will see you next week. Dana and I will be doing Trek Reluctantly again next week before taking a 2-week break for Dana to take care of some other stuff. But next week we'll be back on Trek Reluctantly watching Poirot. So hopefully you can join us for that. And of course, I will also have videos coming out next week. I have a video about Superman and the Mole Men coming out on Wednesday. I have a really random, weird comedic monologue video coming out on Monday that I'm curious to see how badly it bombs, because it is so idiosyncratic and of my head and of my imagination and my sensibilities, and I'm really curious to see if anybody else gets it or finds it funny at all. But anyway, that's Monday. And don't forget, tomorrow Jason and I will be back for our review of the musical episode of Strange New Worlds. So looking forward to watching it and looking forward to reviewing it with Jason and then sharing that review with you all tomorrow. So that's it, everybody. I will see you next time. Take care. Thank you for watching. Have a good night and a good weekend. Bye, everybody.